Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you how I approach shading in Infinite Painter on my Samsung Galaxy Tab S6. Now, if you want to know what brushes I use, there's going to be a link in the description, so go ahead and check that out first if you're trying to replicate this. And if you like what you see, please give this video a like, and if you want to see more, subscribe to my channel. To get started here, I'm just going to show you the very basics of how I approach shading, and then I'm going to show you how I apply that to larger projects. So I will start off here with a sphere, and I will visualize where the light source is coming from. And then I will draw a lighter dot for right where that light source is hitting the sphere. Then on the other side, there's going to be reflected light from the ground, and I will draw that as well with that same light shade. It's not going to be as light in the end, but I just do that to keep it simple. And then in between those two, there's going to be the darkest of the shading, and it's going to be more towards the end of where the shape hits the ground. So in the case of this, it's a sphere, so the shading wraps around the sphere. And then I'm just going to blend all of those colors together very loosely. And then you'll see it kind of gives a three-dimensional shape to this circle and makes it actually look like a sphere. Just those three colors blended together. And then I'm going to duplicate that quick drawing of a sphere that I've done 3 times here. And I'm going to show you how you can change the texture to a matte or a shiny texture. For a matte texture, you would just blend out that shading a little bit more and make it more blurred to make it appear dull. Now for the brush that I'm using, I can tilt my pen sideways to actually make it blend a little softer and wider, and you'll see that in action right here. If your pen doesn't have pen tilt, you'll just want to lightly press and make your brush size bigger. And you can see blending that out really dulled the vibrancy of the shading there, made it look more matte. And now to add a shinier texture, you're going to just strengthen and intensify that shading that you already have laid down. So where the highlight is, I'm really pinpointing that white highlight, making it very bright and very noticeable and contrasted from the rest of the gray around it, and making the reflective light on the bottom a little bit stronger, but not as light as that highlighted point on the top, because that really has to be strong. And sometimes you might want a more reflective mid-tone in the center if it's very shiny, so you might want to add a lighter stripe reflecting around the sphere there, and a darker stripe above that just to make it look more metallic and really shiny. And then sometimes you might want to go all out and do full reflections in the sphere and make it appear as if there is a full landscape around the sphere that's reflecting off of it. This is a useful thing to practice for something like an eyeball that's very shiny and wet, because it's going to reflect the entire atmosphere around it. You should be able to take these basic principles and apply them to almost anything that you are trying to shade. So I'm going to show you how I apply those techniques to drawing something like an eyeball. So first I'm going to sketch out the generalized shapes of everything: the iris, the eyeball, the tear ducts, the top and bottom eyelids, the bone structure around it. You can use a reference if you need to be more accurate with it. But then I'm going to draw in arrows here to show where the light source is coming from. And then I'm going to take a mid-tone gray and fill in where the light would not be hitting those areas. And then you can just blend the white with that gray in a couple areas, and then add in some dark accents for the darkest edges where the light really doesn't touch. And then you can go lighter with those principles on the eyeball, and then just use your generalized idea of where the light is hitting things while also paying attention to a reference that you're looking at if needed. And here I'll draw in the eyelashes and I'll show you how that light source penetrates through those eyelashes and creates a shadow reflection on the eyeball. And you can see it is the opposite of those eyelashes, like how a mirror reflects an image. And you want to show that in the eyeball because it's very shiny. And that light will also cast a shadow on the skin below it as well. And you can see I'm always keeping those principles of where the light is coming from and how the light is reflecting back onto the image in mind. And now I'm going to show you the thought process behind what I just did. So here's a quick sketch of an eyeball, and then the light source is going to shoot downwards towards the top eyelid, right? So it's going to hit that top eyelid, and then it's not going to hit the underneath of that eyelid right here because it curls a little bit under, right? So that is the part that I would shade there with a darker gray. And then the same thing would happen with the lower eyelid, because the light is only hitting that top rim of that eyelid, where the lash line would be. Underneath that would be shaded a little bit darker. And then at the very edge of it, because light from up top is bouncing off of the ground and then back onto the eyelid, you would have reflective light as well. So here I would take a darker gray and shade in that darker shading underneath where the light is not hitting it, right? Then I would take a mid-tone gray between those two and blend them together. And then just doing that softly on the side of your brush, like I said, will create a nice messy shaded effect, and you can blend that more and more or just leave it as is for a more painted effect. And then for doing the eyeball, since it's lighter, you would want to keep the shaded area very, very light. You don't want to go overboard for that right off the bat because you need to keep the eyes white where they're supposed to be. And you'll see here on the iris, I leave a portion of it white because the light source is coming down directly to shine on that part of the eyeball. Just like I painted with the sphere, on the very shiniest sphere example that I showed you, I left a very white pinpoint dot for that highlight because on a wet or shiny surface, there's going to be a very bright reflective light representation on that object of the sun or whatever strong light source is shining on it. And now I'm just sketching in very, very generic, basic eyelashes just to show you how I approach shading those eyelashes. Obviously, eyelashes aren't going to look like this naturally, but this is an easy way to show you how I actually think about it. So light's going to shine down on those eyelashes in the same direction that it has the whole time, right? So when it hits that eyeball, it's going to reflect just like everything else. So I cut through that bright white highlight that I already made, and I draw the reflection of those eyelashes in the opposite direction. And I do that on the whites of the eyes here as well, but with that lighter shading that I did for the rest of the white of the eye, because I don't want to go too dark. If I want to go a little darker than that, I can layer it on top if I need to, a little bit, just like that. But I want to make sure I keep it light to start with. Since it's digital painting, you can always paint over it, it's no biggie, but if you're doing this with any other medium, you'll know that it's good to keep it light. But for the purpose of digital art, I still like to layer it. It's just a good practice to keep. And you'll see how that reflects like that, and keep it in the same direction as the light source. And then those eyelashes on the bottom are going to create a shadow on the skin as well. So keep in mind that light source direction and how it would interact with those eyelashes and create that shadow against the skin on the eyelid underneath. And that's basically how I do it. And it's pretty simple when you think about it in terms of simple shapes and directions. It's more frustrating when you're trying to make something look realistic, but when you break it down to that, then it becomes more about getting a good base sketch, and then shading that base sketch really well, if that makes sense. But like I said, these principles can basically be applied to anything you're going to shade. And if you want to make the surfaces that you're shading look different, you can just add different lines and splatters and dots and specks and bumps and shade those individual bumps if you need to add texture. Whatever you need to do to add in texture. If you need to use different brushes, that's acceptable as well. I just prefer to use one brush for basically everything. That's just kind of how I work. And so far I've just shown you these principles in use with grayscale black and white images, but they can be applied to colored images as well. As you can see here with these little squares I've sketched in. You can blend any colors together with this particular brush that I use, and you can change the highlight color and change the reflection color. Maybe there's multiple light sources, but either way, those same principles stand of how you sketch them in and how I approach how that light hits the object from whatever side the light's coming from. And another way that you can practice color shading, if you're not very good at painting in color yet, is to do a black and white grayscale underpainting like this, make a new layer over top of it and change that layer to a color layer, and then just paint over it. And you'll see that it keeps that black and white grayscale underneath, but allows you to color. This is something I've shown on previous videos before, but it works really well if you use a very well rendered black and white underpainting. Anyway, I hope these tips were useful to you guys, and if you ever have any suggestions for any other tutorials you want me to do for you guys, or any characters you want me to draw, or celebrities, or animals, or anything of the sort, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments. And like I said before, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so now if you want to see more videos like this and more speed painting videos of my other art that I've done. I'm sure you'll like it. And please, if you could, give me a like on this video. Any kind of interaction helps promote my videos to other people. Thanks so much. Have a good one, guys.